Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to another edition of Thinking
Even
White.
they're hot there, didn't I?
You did. This is a thing that you've started doing a lot of.
Well, it kind of throws you off balance and makes you a little unnerved, which in my soul I appreciate.
Fair enough. Yeah. God, last week I really should have done more to try and get Ellie back.
You can't replace me that easily, my friend.
Yeah, so this is Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law.
I'm also from Above the Law, but
You
my
are.
name is Catherine Rubino.
Oh, is it? All right.
It is.
Well, good to know. Yeah, so we're here yet again. Last week, obviously, was our 200th episode, so we're beginning the 201st.
Sorry, I was doing like my own sound effects because I assumed after last week's you kind of pushed out the boat on sound effects, so you probably were reticent to start them again.
Yeah, no, there we go. I don't know. Like it. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. What is up?
Well, you always have to kind of be wary after a big celebratory episode like the 200th that the 201st will be a bit of a letdown emotionally at the very least.
Yeah, no, I mean I can hear that.
But I've kind of come up with the ultimate story to talk about. Seriously, it's perfect.
Oh, I see what you're doing, and
I
don't like it.
thought pretty hard about that one.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is one of the more fun events of last week's news was the revelation that Twitter was punishing a Joe Biden pet fan account.
That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, so the Oval Poffus. Again, if you are not into these sorts of puns, this is going to be
fast forward.
You should just fast forward a bit. Yeah, no, because this is going to happen a bit. So the Oval Poffus, which is a website that is, in honor of the Champ Major and Winston the cat, the new denizens of the White House, at least on the animal side of things. It's a Twitter account connected to a website that honors them with pictures, and whenever they're in the news, sends them around. And
this sounds like some pretty wholesome, good-natured.
Indeed, and the website attached to it raises money for animal shelters.
It's even better. Why would they be punished by Twitter? I mean, it took Twitter 4 years before they banned Donald Trump. Why are they so quick to pull the trigger on animal shelter fundraising endeavor?
It is unclear. Initially,
if only we knew.
Initially, they sent an email saying that this was a impersonation account, which, I mean, query whether or not you can impersonate an animal because they don't have opposable thumbs.
Let's be clear, there are no animals that are tweeting.
Yeah, so put
aside any opinion you may have about.
Yeah, because they're on Parler. The point is
Parler.
Oh God! And
you made that joke. I stole it from you.
Yeah.
I watched it by learning. I learned it by watching you.
Yeah. Honestly, that one may come up a lot more in this bit. So anyway, they originally did that, and then they sent which algorithms can flag people for dumb reasons. We've learned this from our coverage of the bar exam. However, afterwards, there was an update that said, oh, no, this has been resolved. You're cool. And then followed almost immediately after that with, no, we have now reviewed this again. You're illegal, and do not reply to this email. We will not monitor it. You're permabanned.
Okay, before we even get to the kind of the law firm part of this, This seems to break my mind a little bit. I don't understand why after a person, whatever the algorithm is, technology is imperfect. It's only as good as sort of the programming that went into it, whatever. I cannot imagine why after a human reviewed this would say, it's not okay to raise money for animal shelters in this way.
Yeah, it is unclear. So Twitter's terms of service, which, as you pointed out, have been something of an illusory thing over the last several years, but Twitter's terms of service say that you can't have impersonation accounts. You can't be out there saying that you are, in fact, a president or something like that.
Sure.
You can, however, have parody accounts and fan accounts. So if you can get around this by having an account that makes clear in its bio, this is a fan page, this is a parody account, something along those lines, those are protected.
And that makes a fair amount of sense because you don't want somebody reading a tweet to assume that it is the original person if it is not. But if it's very clear that it's a fan account, it seems to
Exactly.
ameliorate all these issues.
Yes. And so this particular account notes that it is both a fan page and not actually affiliated with the White House.
Nor actually any animals tweeting.
Right. Putting aside that part, again, which we have now put aside so far that it's several feet out, social distanced away. But yeah, so all of the hallmarks of the actual terms of service have been met.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't know as though Twitter was prepared for was the fact that the whole account is actually run by the good folks at Claire Locke. So it's being run by one of the foremost media law firm boutiques operating. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, and of course, you hit that when I'm not sitting next to, like, you understand that I can't have the soundboard open at all times and also do all of the other things I have to do with this show. So,
first of all, no, I did not.
See, she didn't realize it, so we did that. Yeah, so
okay.
no, all right.
But, okay, this was a great story before it even became a law story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So our good friends, this media law firm, it seems like the exact opposite of people you want to mess with.
Right. So the Claire Locke actually did not respond. They sent their dog to respond. and, you know, good for the dog, whose name is momentarily escaping me. Began with a G.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's not relevant to the story, or is it?
I mean, I'm not going to be the one who gets in trouble for not adequately naming who the author of this motion is.
The dog.
Yeah.
Dog. I think that's probably sufficient to identify them.
Yeah. Anyway.
So they filed a motion, or was it a letter? What?
They sent a letter to the general counsel
of Twitter,
mm-hmm. Asking, you know, what's going on, and filling it, shall we say, with puns. It's Gipper is the name of the dog, and it is a really impressive set of puns. Like, the commitment to the bit for 4 or 5 pages is really impressive.
You are a big proponent of puns. I'm sure regular listeners of this podcast are aware that you're pun heavy at times.
See, I don't know as though I am, but I appreciate the art form.
Ad reads about puns.
Yeah, I did do that. Yeah. Well, those weren't puns, really. Those were just like jokes that were related to.
Some of them were puns.
It wasn't a pun. It was like, you talk about rabbit and say hop on down. Like, so that's I don't know. Anyway, point is commitment to the bit. Go on.
Yeah. So for you to be impressed by it, my point was just that it must be truly noteworthy.
Yeah. No, I mean, Claire Locke, I feel as though they were getting out, assuming there were associates involved who actually may have written this letter and not really just the dog.
Assuming for a moment the dog did not actually write this. Yeah.
Assuming. I feel like this was a cathartic moment for the people at Claire Locke, who are obviously much more busy with a $1.3 billion lawsuit that they're filing against a bunch of people. If you haven't been following that, they're the folks who are Dominion's lawyers dealing with all that.
Yeah, so they're busy. They're busy.
And I feel like this came at, for Twitter, this was a bad move to mess with a law firm in the first place, but then to mess with a law firm who desperately needed a change of pace and the ability to let loose did set up a great public relations moment
in
for
my
them.
mind. So obviously I have no idea how this letter was drafted, if Gipper was involved or what happens. But in my mind, there's some group chat, maybe Slack or whatever they use internally at the firm, where it's kind of all associates or the entire firm, and they're just for 24 hours just being like, come up with the best animal puns, and then someone's just reading through the full list and plugging them into the letter as appropriate. That's how I imagine this all went down.
Yeah.
If you work there, don't tell me otherwise. I don't want to know. Let me believe that this is actually the way it happened.
But it really does underscore that there are times in this world where a well-placed letter that you allow the public to see, it may be more powerful than anything you want to do.
PR
legally.
is a hell of a drug, right?
Yeah, ideal. It got plenty of attention. It popped around Twitter.
Do we have any the ultimate result yet? Are they back?
You know, I haven't checked it because I was busy this weekend, so I wasn't keeping track. But no, it's hopefully
Gipper will be back to tweeting.
If the firm was involved in doing some work for Gipper, how do you take, I guess any bones you're taking from Gipper, you've got to put in a segregated account like you would.
Well, I think that it's probably part of their Paul Bono work.
Oh. Oh. Anyway, assuming
I am just giddy that I came up with that one.
Assuming they did collect any fees, they would have to put them in a segregated account, which brings us to a discussion about Nota, powered by M&T Bank. You went to law school to be a lawyer, not an accountant. Take advantage of Nota, a no-cost IOLTA management tool that helps solo and small law firms track client funds down to the penny. Enjoy peace of mind with one-click reconciliation, automated transaction alerts, and real-time bank data. Visit trustnota.com/legal to learn more. Terms and conditions may apply.
So yeah, animal law, I guess, was weirdly a theme of this past week because it turned out that a deer was not killed by the South Dakota Attorney General.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that an awkward transition? A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
That's a story that got you real hot last week.
Not just last week. So in the last week, probably if you haven't been following all that closely this story, you might have only heard about it last week when the Post started taking up the story of South Dakota Attorney General Jason Ravensborg. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. Anyway, taking up that story largely because the governor's office, or more accurately, the Department of Public Safety, but with authorization from the governor, released certain documents of the investigation into the South Dakota Attorney General. A lot of people hadn't heard about this case beforehand.
You'd been writing about it for
I'd
months.
been writing about it since September because it's horrifying. The Attorney General of South Dakota killed a guy in September. The AG was driving back from a Trump fundraiser at a restaurant/bar where they went with no masks way back in September. Because South Dakota, second worst in the country. Congrats, North Dakota. But so he was driving back from this fundraiser where they auctioned off, I believe, a handgun that had Trump's name engraved on it. Totally normal stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was coming back from that event and struck a man with his car. He later, when it was discovered that someone was actually dead and authorities got involved, he claimed he thought he'd hit a deer.
That was not true.
No idea. Well, we don't know whether it's not true. Well, it was not true that he hit a deer.
Right.
That is correct.
That part we know.
He hit a guy.
Right.
His claim that he thought he hit a deer.
Someone's dead as a result.
Yes.
Yeah.
The claim that he thought he hit a deer, we don't know whether he subjectively believes that or not. But
he did not.
But he hit somebody. He denies that he knew. He denies that there was any alcohol involved, despite being at a bar for a fundraiser.
Sure.
But what really brought this story, so first of all, this happens. Then the investigation concludes with the prosecutors there agreeing to 3 misdemeanor charges, like illegal lane change is like the charge. There's no charges that even approach different degrees of involuntary or vehicular manslaughter. No anything.
So the fact that someone's dead is irrelevant to the charges.
Leaving the scene of an accident.
Which
no
definitely
any of this.
happens,
Yeah. And no misleading authorities, which brings us to where we are now. So that happened. I was very upset about that a few weeks ago when that was going on. Still not a lot of mainstream coverage. Mainstream coverage picks up with these revelations that authorities found that the dead man's glasses were inside the AG's car, which is where they ended up because he struck him straight on through the windshield, which really puts a lie to the idea that it was a deer, maybe, because the idea that you hit something, like you may have sideswiped something, that's critical to the argument that I'm not sure what I hit. Hitting straight through your windshield makes it a lot harder to say I had no idea what I did.
Also, there are glasses in your car that came from someone, right? They're not yours.
Right. And authorities confronted him with this. There's transcripts of that. That was part of what was getting released. It also puts you in a situation of having it been a direct hit. The question is either you knew that this wasn't a deer and lied to us and left somebody to die on the side of the road, or you were so drunk you had no idea that you had actually hit a person when you did.
Both of them seem more plausible than he earnestly believed.
Right. Both bad for him and both issues that the local prosecutors are seeming to
shrug
totally
their shoulders
ignore.
at. Yeah.
That said, the local government in South Dakota seems largely outraged by this. The governor, of course, released this stuff. It's all part of an effort she called upon him to resign. He said he's not going to do that because he doesn't see why he should have to. Respect for law is not a thing, I guess. So the state legislature is beginning an impeachment discussion. All of these releases of all of the interviews are certainly damning as far as that goes. He has now secured a gag order to prevent anyone else from seeing any of this evidence at this point, claiming that he needs his trial would be compromised, even though none of the stuff that's being released would have any bearing on an illegal lane change trial, which at this point, reminder, is all that is going on. And the state prosecutors consented to this gag order, really underscoring that they are just as much in the tank for not having anything ever come
well,
out.
I mean, they're the ones who brought the charges, right?
So they don't want anything to come out either that makes them look bad.
It makes them look awful. I would say query whether or not that's even a worse look, right? If state prosecutors have this kind of evidence and have these questions on the record, they have all of the information, right? Yeah. But, part of me, the person who went to law school, has respect for the concept of the law and whatnot, says, well, releasing this information is not great.
Yeah,
but
agreed.
It's not sort of the thing you want to see. But on the other hand, I feel very strongly that the society writ large is better off being aware of this than not.
Yeah, the real problem for me is, yes, I think that people deserve fair trials and not to have this handled in the media. And to that extent, it is a bad thing for the government to be releasing investigative data before, the whole thing's done. But these charges of illegal lane change using an electronic device, and I can't remember the third one, but it's no more damning than those two charges. That trial is not impacted by any of this.
Right.
These transcripts. The reason these transcripts are being gagged is to push down the road this more public-facing, more political punishment. It has nothing to do with a fair trial. It has everything to do with the impeachment discussion and the resignation pressure. And to that extent, it is, while I respect the rule of law argument and say he's got a point that this stuff shouldn't be coming out to compromise a fair trial, the reality of the situation is that this is a disrespect of the concept of the rule of law to utilize I need a fair trial as a way of putting a clamp on something that is irrelevant to whether or not you get a fair trial, but entirely relevant to the actual administration of justice.
Sure. But to devil's advocate again, on the other hand, my guess is that this is the most damning of the information that's available to be released, right?
Hopefully. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully,
I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I have no idea. But making, educated guesses here, it seems to me that if you were the one who was releasing this information, you're going to start with the biggest one. You're going to start with the big doozy, especially if your goal is to either put pressure on for additional charges or for political ramifications, impeachment, that sort of thing. Social sciences has proven that people mostly remember the first thing they hear about any given story. So you want them to have sort of the biggest headline, the most shocking detail to be out there. And I think, and also, I mean, the fact that the dead man's glasses was in the AG's car is a shocking reveal.
Yeah.
Right? It is the dun-dun-dun moment right here. So I certainly hope that that's the most shocking information that exists. And I don't know, but this seems awful.
Yes, it is truly awful. It has played out as a really tragic story. Not only not only the man's life, but then a person whose job it is to be the symbol of law in law and order in a state refusing to accept responsibility for anything, pushing this down, hijacking these concepts of fair trial as a way of keeping his political career alive. Just really kind of a slow motion continuing tragedy that is still going on. We don't have a resolution yet. We'll know more in the future.
On developing story.
Still. Anyway, there is no good transition out of that.
Well, sometimes you have awful stories and,
How have law firms weathered previous economic downturns and come out stronger on the other side? LexisNexis Interaction has released an in-depth global research report confronting the 2020 downturn, lessons learned during previous economic crises. Download your free copy at interaction.com/likealawyer to see tips, strategies, plans, and statistics from leaders who have been through this before and how they've reached success again.
So another big story of this past week, I think we've actually both written about Paul Davis.
Paul Davis is becoming, an early contender for the Above the Law Lawyer of the Year award.
It is just barely March.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, listen, if you don't know his name, what have you been reading for the last few months?
Paul Davis came to our attention originally because he was a lawyer who was...
January 7th. Is when I first learned his name.
It was January 7th, so you can guess why he came into the news. He was identified at the riot, and it turned out he was an assistant general counsel
and head of HR.
Head of HR. Which problematic.
Which really hurts my mind sometimes to think about. Goosehead Insurance.
At an insurance company, they promptly dismissed him given all of this problem, which on the one hand, you say, good move. On the other hand, you say, I'm not sure that the break happened just on January 6th. How did this person rise to this job in the first place?
Sure. And more than just being identified as attending the Capitol on January 6th, he also posted social media posts that where he boasted about being tear gassed and said, what we're trying to do is get into the Capitol right here, or something along those lines. And he says now that he did not storm the castle. He was peacefully protesting. But again, that footage is what it is. But so, he was fired. Then he decided to put his law degree to good use and filed a case where he named every single politician as a defendant, as well as Mark Zuckerberg. And he sought to have the entire 117th Congress overturned, saying that there were violations of Voting Rights Acts and civil rights violations.
But he had a plan for what we would do. Obviously, if you did strike down the entire U.S. government, that would strike you as it would be a problem. But he has a plan for dealing with
Gondor has no king.
Yes, Gondor doesn't have a king. His position is that in The Lord of the Rings, Gondor was able to survive not having a king by turning over power to the stewards, and he said that maybe that's what we should do.
My thing is, this has obviously gotten a lot of the buzz, right? Hobbit-loving lawyer, right? Because he uses a fictional example to say what should happen in the event of actually overturning the entire system of government that we have.
Sure, fictional.
Now who's being naive? But here's the thing. It's because, there's a steward in Gondor.
Mm-hmm. Denethor II. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, nerd check over here does what it does. But here's the thing. There have been stewards IRL.
You could have Prince Regents and stuff like that. It really only works in a monarchical system.
Well, sure. It's not our form of government. Agree. But you don't even have to go to fiction, is my point. There are two fundamental problems. One is we're not a monarchy. Two is we are real, right?
Right. Yes.
So you could have boiled it down to one problem if you wanted.
Anyway, that case he got fired from.
He did get fired from a bunch of by several of the plaintiffs there.
And then he's trying to get law fees for the paw bono work that he did there.
I see what you did. You brought it right back.
Yeah. So he's trying to get legal fees from that, but now he's filed a new lawsuit. Now his new plan does not involve anyone from Middle Earth. It instead involves a situation where Trump...
Well, it's a rehash of the original complaint.
Very similar arguments, yes. But now the plan is that if the government does anything in the intervening period here, Trump gets to write an objection that the court will say, oh, well, then that's...
I mean, no.
Yeah.
No. Where's he going to write it? He's banned from Twitter.
Yeah.
That's as good as he gets.
Yes. So that's the plan. But Paul Davis is back. He's now got this new theory.
He's like a real character.
Yeah. Hey, one wonders when the vexatious litigation hammer falls down on this, but for now...
Well, I mean, the judge in the case has already said that he thought the underlying case was, quote, without merit. So my guess is we don't have very long to beat up on Paul Davis, but, as long as he keeps on filing motions, I will continue to write about them.
We'll get there. But, hey, sometimes you look at the U.S. government and you think, maybe maybe it would be better if no. Not really necessarily. No. But if you got rid of the government, you could streamline administrative tasks. Let's hear from our friends at Lexicon.
Here's a message just for the attorneys out there. So you passed the bar, joined a firm, or even built your own. Now are you finding out that you're doing more administration than actual law practice? Lexicon can help. Lexicon is a legal services and technology provider with over a decade of experience streamlining administrative tasks like timekeeping, HR, billing, client intake, and more, so you can focus on maximizing billable hours and increasing client satisfaction. Call 855-4LEXICON or visit lexiconservices.com/go to learn more.
That was smooth like silk.
So that was basically all that was going on. The one thing that I thought was worth an extra bit of conversation.
Okay.
You wrote some bit about Gordon Kaplan.
Yes.
And we never really got a chance to talk about that because the 200th episode happened. So Gordon Kaplan, formerly of Wilkie.
Right. Former chair of Wilkie.
Yes. Who was the highest profile person as a lawyer
yeah.
podcast, clearly the most important person involved in the Varsity Blues scandal. I think there were some sitcom people also.
And Becky who?
Yeah, clearly from our perspective, Gordon Kaplan being the most important involved. Yeah. But you got an update on him as he's now, he's also been a guest of this particular show. He has been on this podcast before.
You can go back and listen to that episode too. But so he had pled guilty to a bunch of charges, all that had taken place already, but that was not sort of the end of the potential consequences. He was, his license was on the line, but he avoided disbarment, and a ethics panel said that he would just be suspended for 2 years, dating back to the date of his original interim suspension. So he will at some point in the future be able to practice law again. He said, I've destroyed my life. It was a bunch of letters from folks saying, he's such a great person. This is his first ethical lapse. It has more to do with his personal life than his professional one. So the court was convinced, or the ethics panel rather, was convinced and decided not to drop the disbarment hammer.
I mean, which I understand. Listen, the reason he was on this show in the past was for kind of heroic pro bono work.
Sure. That's actually very interesting. We've had, when I originally published the story, we did have a bunch of reaction to folks being like, oh, it's only because he's, rich or was rich and powerful, has a lot of powerful friends that they're making this decision. A lot of people just kind of angry about it in general. But I think that is an interesting kind of counter, that he could potentially use his license in service of really public service and public good works. So making sure he still has that ability in the future at some point might be useful.
Yeah, I certainly think that the recognition of what he did wrong and why was in the quotes that you had of his was useful.
And he kind of, puts the blame very much on big law-ish culture, saying that kind of striving for perfection and that things are never good enough unless everything's perfect. The perfectionism that is widely seen throughout big law, and frankly has lots of repercussions within the industry, right? We have terrible incidences of mental health issues, of addiction issues, and I think a lot of the underlying causes are rooted back to the types of people who are drawn to elite legal practice and a lot of the behavioral tendencies that are reinforced by big law. And I think that this notion of perfectionism and elitism has a lot of negative consequences, and that's how in Gordon Kaplan's particular life they express themselves. But he admits that, I ruined my life.
Yeah, well, indeed. Now, he was a litigator, right?
He was a litigator. Yeah.
See, can't really do much with that. But if you work with contracts and don't use contract tools, you're missing a lot. Save time, make more money, and do a better job for your clients with Contract Tools by Paper Software. Contract Tools is the most powerful word add-in for working with contracts. Thousands of lawyers all over the world rely on Contract Tools every day for every kind of deal. Visit papersoftware.com to watch a demo and get a free trial. So, Catherine, we've made it through another episode of this show.
201.
201.
201's in the books, baby.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So, thanks for listening to the show. You can always be subscribed to the show. That way you get the episodes as soon as they drop. You should be giving it reviews, stars, and writing some things. That all shows engagement, and that's all valuable for us. You should be reading Above the Law. As always, you should follow. I'm at Joseph Patrice. She's at Catherine1, the numeral 1 on Twitter. Maybe she'll even tweet something this week. Who knows?
Hey, I've been much better about using my Twitter.
I mean, being better than zero is certainly a thing.
It's
an infinite improvement.
First of all, we are still going to applaud even small changes in behaviors. First of all.
Are we?
Okay.
Okay.
I am. Listen.
Wow, well done.
You're a dick.
Yes.
Anyway, my
Next.
point is,
Yeah.
listen, Rome is not built in a night. Small changes lead to bigger changes in your life. It's 2021. We need to take the W's wherever we get them.
Fair enough. All right. So you should be listening to also the Jabot and the Legal Tech Week Legal Technology Journalist Roundtable that we're on. You should be checking out the other LTN shows. And with all that, I guess another shout out back to Contract Tools, Lexicon, Nota, powered by M&T Bank, and LexisNexis Interaction. And with that, I think we're good to go. Apparently, you don't get peace this week.
Peace.